got 20 seconds. Come on, Amanda, go.
Keep moving. Good. Get those knees up. Explode. Good. Explode. Let's go. Up.
Rock forward. Let's go. One more. Go.
This is the Fight Strength Podcast, NSFW on Breaking Muscle.
Hello again and welcome to a new episode of Fight Strength NSFW on Breaking Muscle. I'm Jason Burgos, Senior Editor for MMAsucker.com and resident MMA diehard. With me, as always, is the man likely to soon be running a strength training seminar in a city near you, or training an American top team fighter that might end up beating one of your favorites, and that is the one and only Phil Daru. Phil, what is going on, big dog?
Man, we're going on 3 hours of podcasting. I know that. They might as well just call us the Joe Rogan podcast right now.
It's an experience. It's been an experience.
For sure, man. I'm good, though. I'm good. I got a lot of new projects coming up. Still writing the ebook with Tony Ricci. That's going to be out pretty soon. Got some brand new seminars lined up. The earliest now is going to be in Atlanta, obviously February 3rd. If you're out in Atlanta on February 3rd, once you stop by ATT Atlanta and come check me out, I'm going to be doing a seminar and a full clinic. We'll be doing some practical exercises. I'll be breaking down some form, also doing a presentation on periodization for MMA and combat sports, and then doing some weight cutting and nutrition. So we'll be doing a lot there. And then in March, I go to Vancouver at Grind Athletics. That's going to be fun. I've never been to Canada, so we'll see how that goes. It's probably cold as shit, and that's just the way it is. But it's all good. And then we're looking at, what's that? That makes it March, right? So then April, I'll be at LA at the Engineering Combat Athletes Seminar with PJ Nestler and Dan Gardner. And we just got the new Muscle Farm venue there. So that whole gym, we're going to take it over, which is going to be really good. So I'm excited about that. And then, like I said, in March, January, February, March, April, May we got Poland, and then June is Poland, and then
April
in
and
July,
June?
Yeah, man, June.
Oh, wow.
June is the summit. So June I'll be out there at the yeah. So combat sports summit out there in Poland, in Youth Poland, and then in July I'm going back to Chechnya. So we got a lot of stuff going on. And plus, my fighters are fighting. You know, Joanna's probably going to fight pretty soon. Dustin's probably going to fight pretty soon. King Mo, obviously, we got the tournament coming up. So it's a lot going on in the works. Plus, my other fighters, my up-and-comers. Scott Aspen's going to be fighting in 5 weeks. We got a fight this weekend with I got my boy Enrique fighting El Fuete. He's going to be doing his thing. We got Sabah, and we got Gleason T-Bow all fighting this weekend. So it's all good.
Now, what were you going to say?
Just a lot of stuff. You know how it is.
Now, for like the thing with PJ Nestler, Dan Gardner, you know, you have some other stuff in the pipeline with other trainers. Now, you know, that's obvious. You guys came together, came up with an idea. You want to do it here and there. Now, for the people that are listening that are coaches and trainers tuning in to our show on Breaking Muscle and could use some tips on seminars, how do you go about getting like the Poland, the Russia, the Vancouver? Is it people contacting you? Is it a fighter contacting someone else and then it works its way towards you? Like, how are you getting these seminars, if you can give any tips to people and trainers out there that would like to get into that side of things?
Yeah, you know, to be honest, if I had like this secret remedy or formula to say, you know, that this is what we did, but I didn't do shit. I actually just did what I was supposed to do. And honestly, it's just training and coaching my guys and putting up content that people want to see and hear and read. And from there, the chips will fall where they may. And I think that that's primarily what's been going on. And I've just been doing my job and coaching my guys and being passionate, and also, you know, trying to be as authentic but also innovative, and making sure that I'm always raising the bar, constantly learning. I'm also going to my own seminar. I'm going to an FRC seminar with Dr. Spina, and I'll be learning some functional range conditioning at the end of this month. So I'm always learning, man. I'm actually going to take a trip out to Westside Barbell, go hang out with Louis, and check out him, you know. And then, like I said, from there, and then like constantly going down to see Corey Peacock. You know, my boy, he's a PhD in exercise phys, and he has his own lab out there. So I'll even stand in on some of his lectures, you know what I'm saying, when I have the time. So it's just constantly trying to better yourself. Even when you think you know it all, that's probably the wrong attitude to have, and you're not going to make it very far. Once you realize that, once you're smart enough to understand that you don't know shit, that's the greatest asset you're going to have.
I mean, you've told me that people have messaged you on social media saying, "Oh man, love the podcast, great stuff." Would another tip be for people out there to, the more content and the more branding you put out of yourself does help in terms of getting noticed too for seminars and all this stuff?
I was talking to my client tonight, and she's just a regular, I also train general public. Like, people don't think that I think I just train fighters and athletes. I do train the general public. I also have templates and programs for them as well. But I was basically saying, man, like, the things I do for content, man, the things I do to make sure people understand what I'm doing on a daily basis is out of this world. Like, right now we're going on our 4th hour of podcasting, and just so people would realize exactly, what we're doing and what I would want to put out there as good content and something that's relative for that individual. I think that a lot of things in the industry, people put out shitty content just for the sake of putting it out, and they have to realize that people are actually following them, and they have an influence in this industry. And if you're going to put something out, it has to be something that's actually going to help them and be, like I said, authentic, but also making sure that you are raising the bar and actually doing something that's very interesting.
Oh, I mean, makes sense. I mean, this week's episode is going to come out it's going to come at you from a lot of different angles. I mean, in general, we are going to cover a plethora of topics, but all in relation to the sport of MMA. Be it MMA strength training concepts from Phil or his thoughts on coaching the unique athletes in this sport. I mean, so first off, you have a lot of topics that you want to focus on. Right away, we'll jump into something that's relevant from the last few weeks in the sport, and it's why weight cutting is really hurting the sport. Especially MMA. It's always been a problem in boxing, but MMA, it's really been tough, mainly with the UFC. I mean, you had the Uriah Hall incident at this weekend's event. Like, he fainted, had to be taken to the hospital during weight cutting. We just talked about on the JB podcast. We talked about it before with Joanna and perfecting athletes and all that stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts, and why do you feel like weight cutting is really doing a lot of damage to the sport?
At the end of the day, man, when you try to cut weight like that, and even if you have a strategic approach, and like I said, we'll be going over that in this ebook that I'm writing with Tony, but even then, it's like it's damaging to the body regardless of what you do. You're depleting your body of nutrients, you're depleting your body of natural resources, and you're not going to perform. No matter what you do, you're not going to perform at your 100%. And also, what you're doing is taking years off your life. When you are cutting weight, when you are depleting your body like that, you're actually killing yourself. And I'm being drastic about this because it actually is something that needs to be addressed. Yeah. This is something that we've seen in the past, that people die from this shit.
Yeah.
Kidney
failure, all that kind of crazy, dangerous stuff.
You can go from kidney failure to just regular pass outs and people falling and cracking their head open and dying just from that. Metabolic damage, not being able to, and having fucked up thyroids and things like that. That's something that can take with you for a long time. And that could, obviously, at the end of the day, that'll end your career as a fighter because you can't cut weight anymore. So I think that from that point of view, it's definitely damaging the person, the fighter, and the performance that you could see if the fighter didn't have to cut massive amount of weight. Look at Dustin Poirier right now going up to 155. Looks great. Yeah. 45 was a big weight cut for him. I feel that was the best opportunity for him to make a change, and especially when you're getting older. And females are even more at risk of these situations. And we've seen it with Joanna, and that's the case that we want to make. Obviously she wants to win her belt back, and that's something that we are going to go after, and we're going to have a strategic approach to her weight cut from here on out, especially even before she starts camp. But I think that if this whole weight cutting issue was minimized from the weights being distributed, as far as having these gaps of weight classes, something more like boxing, I think that would be better off. Instead of going 170 all the way to 155, that's a big gap. I'm a guy, when I fought, I walked around at 181. Now, obviously, I'm not big enough stature-wise to fight at 170. I'm 5'8",
Yeah.
but I'm a thicker guy. 155, I had to suck down to make 155, And then the next weight class was 145. There was no fucking way I was making 145. You know what I'm saying? I would have to cut off my fucking leg, And at the same time, 170, the guys were just too big. They were cutting from like 210 pounds, 215 pounds. So these types of gaps are causing guys to cut weight, causing females to cut weight, make it to. And if we can minimize those weight classes, then we can see a better outcome in performance, and two, it'll be a healthier change for the entire sport.
I mean, I agree with every single thing you're saying, and I think in a lot of ways it is damaging. I want to come at a different angle, and I thought about this after, we started coming up with the script, and I saw this, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe in a weird way, like they probably thought, especially for the UFC, because, I mean, we've seen it in other countries, but the UFC instituted a morning weigh-in the day before the event, and you're having more issues with weight cutting in the last 2 years since they instituted that, since the years before. But do you think because of the bad reactions fighters are having and how difficult it's becoming, do you think that's forcing what we've all wanted? Just like you said, guys like Dustin Poirier, Donald Cerrone, Jorge Masvidal, all these guys are moving up. So in a weird way, the bad ramifications by accident, it's probably forcing what we all want anyway. You guys say, screw that shit, I don't want to, go cut weight by the morning, and they're just going up to where they should be anyway.
Everybody's smart enough or has a coach in mind to say, okay, I think we need to move classes to do that. Everybody is gonna try to gain an edge, and if that edge is cutting more weight to actually try to find a way to be the bigger guy or the bigger girl, or that's gonna correlate into a stronger person. You cutting down to that weight is not going to make you a stronger person at all. It's actually going to make you an even weaker person and even less, a less optimal self, of your own being. So it'll be a shell of your own self at the end of the day, because, like I said, you're depleting your body. But the as far as like the morning weigh-ins and things like that, I think also they damaged the rehydration process due to no more IVs. And I think they're doing like small IVs now, right, or something like that from what I heard. But that's still not enough. Taking away those IVs, I don't see what the big issue was. Maybe obviously with the drug testing, I don't see that being an issue. Like what they're going to put in the IVs from here, USADA's going to test them anyways. Yeah. So it really shouldn't be an issue. They should actually be able to let them back in because of USADA. So I don't know why that happened, and that's something that's something that really makes me a little weary about the state of the sport at the end of the day, and that's why I wanted to make sure that we are aiding our guys to actually make a weight that's manageable, instead of being 40 pounds away. Yep. We need to be at 15%, and I'm talking when we start fight camp 8 weeks out.
Yeah,
not like the week of, by then you should be around 10 to 12%, so, and like I said, I'm actually going through a 7-day protocol in the ebook, so you can get that too as well. But, in the ebook, in that 7 days, if you're not down to a certain weight, the protocol is not going to fucking work.
Right.
So if you're 20 pounds over, well, shit, you're going to have to find something else to do, because that's not going to work, man. You messed up on your diet at that point.
Yeah. And I think that's another part, along with the guys don't want to deal with the drama of weight cutting. They're going up in a division where they probably should be. It's forcing more guys to be professionals 365 days a year, having the proper diet, the kind of nutrition outside of camp. The guys like Rampage Jackson, who used to blow up like 30 pounds in between fights, like that's happening less, and it's forcing professionalism into the sport. And it's, in a way, and again, it's accidental and it's not what they planned, but if it brings about what we need to make fighters better, I think it's completely worth it. I mean, moving on to the next point, you wanted to talk about what is most important from a physical preparation standpoint to train throughout a training camp, and you want to go through step-by-step phases of those particular preparations.
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing you want to do is obviously assess the athlete, assess a needs analysis for what they want to do, and what they need from from an athletic standpoint. If they're lacking explosive power, if they're lacking aerobic capabilities, if they're lacking threshold, anything that we can see from that perspective to make them a better athlete, we want to address that firmly throughout the camp. But we also want to make sure that we're structurally, putting it into place so it's potentiating into the next, and we're not just kind of throwing shit at the wall. So for me, I would always make an assessment, and like I said, we take the guys over to the lab. We make sure we give them a full movement assessment. We give them a full physiological assessment. We take their body fat percentage. This also helps with the weight cut. It gives us a basal metabolic rate that actually can see how much calories they should actually consume to maintain, lose, or gain weight. And then also it shows me how much water they're holding, and also shows me their lean body mass. So I can actually see how lean they are, how much body fat they're holding. And that kind of gives us a guarantee of what we need to do going into fight camp from their diet perspective. And then going into the physical preparation standpoint, for the strength and conditioning, like I said, if for the VO2, a lot of the guys, and we just did a test on a couple of our athletes, me and Corey over at Nova Southeastern University. We went in the lab and we tested their VO2, and all of them tested outstanding, but the one thing that we were lacking is explosive power. And I think the main issue there is that they're getting so much work from their skills and technical and tactical training from an aerobic standpoint that their aerobic capacities are so, top notch, that they're not getting enough volume and frequency of strength training and explosive power work because they're so beat up from the technical and tactical training. Now, I'm not saying that this is something that needs to be cut out. Obviously, this is something that's crucial for a fighter. Yeah. You want to be technically sound, and you want to have good tactics going into your fight camp. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is I think that we need more time to evaluate the situation and actually work on plugging in holes, just like you would do if somebody was lacking wrestling or lacking stand-up. They come from a different background. It's just going to make them a better athlete. It's going to make them a better performer. They'll be actually winning by knockout instead of unanimous decisions. And we're seeing a big fluctuation from percentage base. I think I watched I seen the statistics, and basically the knockouts were around 30%. The rest were all decision and some very few submission. So I mean, the pendulum has swung from KOs to unanimous decisions, and I think because of the way people are training, back in the day, and I say back in the day, but a couple years back, there was a lot more knockouts, but there was also a swing, and a lot of people were doing more sparring and things like that, and going for more of the explosive work, or I can't say that they weren't doing strength training, because I wasn't in camp with the guys then. But what I can say is that what I'm seeing now is that all of our guys that I train, and I've trained, and I've done the count, man. I've trained over 100 fighters since I was 19. And that's 10 years of work. And what I've seen primarily is that, they have a strong aerobic base, which basically means that they can keep an energy system consistently with oxygen, but never be able to have those quick bursts of energy or be explosive enough to end a fight. And you have some outliers. Obviously, you have like a Tyron Woodley, Will Brooks, those guys that I know, that are explosive. But, primarily I'm saying from a basis standpoint, it's all aerobic based. And I think that we need to get back to actually getting these guys stronger and stop being afraid of getting them bigger. And that is the case for the weight cutting issue. So it all comes together full circle, right? Guys are being worried about weight cutting. They're not strength training because they're worried about the weight cut. Yeah. And then they're not getting stronger, which in turn, they're not going to be more explosive and more powerful. And then you have boring fights.
Now, I mean, I'm sure coaches and trainers in all different sports, be it basketball, football, hockey, probably have this issue where they don't get maybe guys enough to do strength training and everything. What would you recommend or advice, like, for example, that you're only maybe getting a fighter once a week or kind of thing? How do you maximize such little time, or is it just not enough? Is the only way to max it really get more time, or can you maximize one session a week and really get something special out of into an athlete?
Okay, from my standpoint, it's very hard with the little amount of frequency and volume to actually get a full stimulus for that particular modality. What I would say is if that can't happen with me, it needs to happen in their skills training. So we're talking about, if you're going to do pad work, work on, explosive movements, work on heavy punches, work on, hard throwing hooks, work on, your straight two, work on your overhand, but make sure that they're explosive and they're timed out efficiently. Also with the wrestling, work on blast doubles, work on picking up, your training partner and walking around the cage or the mat, whatever you're at, doing these things on top of your physical preparation and your strength and conditioning will actually help you. And we do that at American Top Team. The guys will run through a circuit every Saturday, and it's more sport specific, they'll do like a 3x5 minute round circuit where they're picking their opponents up. They're doing grappling exchanges. They're working off the wall, and then they're going in doing pad work. So it simulates a fight sequence from an aerobic, an anaerobic, and a lactic standpoint, which actually will carry over more efficiently into, obviously, the fight game because it's obviously more sport specific. But for me, if I get a guy or a female once a week, the only thing I can probably do is keep them from injuring themselves. So from that point, it has to be corrective exercises, maybe doing some type of some release treatment, myofascial release, what I'm saying, also fixing any type of imbalances or any nagging injuries that they may have, and also utilizing diaphragmatic breathing and core stabilization techniques, intra-abdominal pressure, and learning how to move efficiently just for restoration, purposes.
Do you think like some of those training regimens that are sport specific, outside away from you, that are more based to explosiveness and those kind of things, are they doing them less in a lot of training camps because are they trying to avoid injury? Is that the reason why maybe that happens less than it maybe should or you would prefer? Is it an injury reduction kind of thing?
From a physical preparation standpoint or from a sport specific?
I mean, you suggested that on Saturday, ATT does, or you suggest power double legs and different kind of sparring that are more for strength training. Are they not doing it as much because it's for injury? They're trying to avoid them?
No, I think, it's more of controlled chaos in a sense. They are really trying to control the intensity there, but it's still, like I said, it's not all out sparring. You know what I'm saying? It's more of like you're there for, like, if your training partner's there, they're there to be a dummy. So, it's not like they're resisting there, but they're making them move efficiently. They're making them move more explosively. And they're doing it in a fashion that you would find in a cage or in a ring or wherever, to be more sport specific. But it's not all out sparring like you would see. It's not MMA sparring to where, a guy's trying to kill you, you're trying to kill your training partner. It's not like that at all. But they're just trying to make sure that they're getting that that stimulus there through that type of training. And I mean, as far as keeping guys safe, my main goal really, in all actuality, in any strength and conditioning coach, any physical preparation specialist or whatever you want to call it, our main goal is to keep these guys healthy, and keep them reserved so they can actually do their training, do their skill-specific training. And then we want to make sure that they're getting stronger and progressing, getting stronger, getting more aerobically sound, things like that. But first and foremost is keeping them safe, and then the performance will come after that. So for us, we are actually aiding in the fact of keeping them safe. It's not something that's going to take away from them. You will know a good strength coach by the number of hurt athletes he has. Okay. If he doesn't have any hurt athletes, they're not injured, it's a good strength coach. If everybody on his roster fucked up, they got, torn hamstrings, a fucked up rotator cuff, obviously that strength coach not doing his job. And it may not be from inside the weight room. It may be, non-contact injuries on the field, in the cage, whatever the case may be. They didn't structurally, prepare that fighter to have high amounts of impact. And that's what happens.
All right. I mean, now you wanted to, the next part we wanted to move on to is fast and slow twitch muscle fiber type fighters and why it is important to test and train accordingly. Now, you want to set up, we have a clip from Lou Simmons from that a guest spot on the Joe Rogan Experience. You want to just set it up by letting people know who Lou Simmons is and why you want them to hear this particular clip? Yeah,
so Louis Simmons is it's a legendary powerlifting and strength coach out of Westside Barbell. He started Westside Barbell in Ohio. Studied all the old Soviet Union methods. He's the creator of the conjugate method, or at least the West Side version of the conjugate method. Very, very, very intelligent person, man. Also has the strongest gym in the world, by far has the most world records ever from a powerlifting standpoint, and also trains a lot of different athletes from track and field to even MMA. Trains Matt Brown, or at least he did. What else? I think he trained Mark Coleman, and he also trained who else? Another, I think it was the UFC heavyweight. Gold hair. Black dude, gold hair.
Black and gold hair. Was that UFC heavyweight? Oh man, I don't know. He's old school kind of fighter.
Old school. Yeah.
I think I know you talk about. He's real tall.
No, black dude.
Oh, Kevin Randleman.
Yeah, in his heyday when he was a world champion. Yeah. So I mean, he's got his go around with all different athletes. But yeah, so he was talking with Joe Rogan on his podcast, and they were talking about Tyron and how, what Joe said on Twitter one time is that, Tyron holds a lot of muscle and it takes more energy to expel and more oxygen to actually keep that muscle going for 5 rounds, and he kind of dies out. And what Joe was saying is understandable, but what Louis is saying makes total sense, and you'll hear it in the clip here.
All right, now here's the clip.
You don't have to get bigger to be stronger.
That's confusing to a lot of people, because a lot of people think of big muscles meaning stronger, and that's the only way to get stronger. But I've seen some people in powerlifting competitions that just lift insane amounts of weight, and they're not that big.
Right.
Well, how is that possible?
What muscle type? You're always talking about I've always mentioned you a few times. You talk about like Woolley, and so he's all muscular. He runs out of gas real quick.
Who?
Tyron
Woodley.
Yeah. He has. They're playing in the same. They got a pretty much the same amount of muscle mass. He just has very fast twitch muscle. Mm-hmm. And another guy you're talking about endurance may have more slow twitch muscle, and then so that guy, that's why he can fight 5 rounds, and Tyron, where it starts to wear out, somewhere in the second round.
Well, it's also because a guy like Tyron is capable of putting out so much energy, like the way he can attack guys and move so fast. It's like having a 500 horsepower engine versus having a 400 horsepower. One's going to just use more gas.
That's right. Well, that's fast. That's why you got sprinters and you got marathon runners, and they look totally different.
So there's a clip from Louis Simmons on what Phil was talking about. I mean, any thoughts on what he said, and specifically mentioning Tyron Woodley in that clip?
Yeah, so obviously I know Tyron pretty personally, and Louis is spot on with that. A lot of guys, like I said, they were born with that type of muscle. They were, and even CT Fletcher actually came out on Twitter and said the same thing, not so much from a scientific background, but just from like practical application and knowing this, just from learning and training in the world of bodybuilding and strength training. But yeah, fast twitch fibers obviously are going to take more energy per unit. So what a fast twitch muscle fiber does is actually it's more built for explosive movements. It's more built for anaerobic capacity. Slow twitch fibers, you'll primarily see them on marathon runners, what Louis said. And what happens there is you have to make sure that you have to know the fighter in general, what they are capable of, what their primarily use of their muscle tissue is, and then you have to train that accordingly. What I mean by that is that when Tyron now trains, he trains in spurts of energy where he utilizes his fast twitch muscle fibers, but then he also makes sure that he is going to be able to recover as fast as possible from those short bursts of energy. This is why he fights the way he fights now. People don't see that, but that's just the way it is. It has to be like that. Otherwise, he will not last 5-minute rounds, five-minute rounds.
Yeah.
Right? You can't get mad at a guy for being athletically sound and having those type of fiber types. Otherwise, he's going to go ahead and gas out in the first or second round because he's so explosive. Yes, he can end the fight, but if he doesn't get an opportunity to, it's going to end up being that he just runs out of gas, runs out of oxygen, runs out of energy because of those fast twitch fibers are only built for so long. They're only built to do work for so long. Mm-hmm. So he has to make sure he regenerates that oxygen, regenerates that ATP, and goes back and keeps on going in a sequence like that. So you explode, you relax. You explode and you relax. You just got to find that, that balance, and how you train that is doing the same concept. Like for me, I would have them do short bursts of prowler sprints. have them do light shadow boxing for about 10 to 20 seconds. The same thing they would do in the cage. They would have to get on their bike and learn how to move and create angles. What I mean by get on the bike is basically move efficiently so they can avoid any type of strikes or takedowns. And you do that, and then once they're fully recovered, or at least semi-recovered, I would say 70 to 80%, you can explode again. And that's how you would train. And that can be phase by phase, or like I always say, I like to train the guys opposite to what they're good at outside of camp. So for me, I would have Tyron or anybody who's fast twitch work highly aerobic base. So they would do long, slow distance running, right? And then once we get into camp, then we can work their strengths. So then we'll be doing his anaerobic work, his lactic threshold work. And that's phase by phase. You can do that any type of way. But you got to make sure that you build that aerobic base. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I always say this, and I'll keep saying it, and even Louis says it most of the time, a pyramid is only as tall as the width of its base. So we have to create a wide base enough to make sure that pyramid is stacked high.
All right, fair enough. Now, we'll have some more topics to talk about in a bit, but now we will transition into our weekly Ask Daru segment. The first question comes from Fight Performance Industries on Instagram. They ask, I'm interested to know how you personally deal with imbalances in fighters' legs over the years. I found a relatively common occurrence of the lead leg being slightly more developed in terms of not only musculature, but also strength and balance. I found simply incorporating more single leg exercises and observing and correcting technique works. But some athletes also may need soft tissue work. For example, a client of mine who fights orthodox had very short and tight external rotators, glutes mainly, on his lead leg, and short, tight medial rotators, all abductors and TFL on his rear leg, possibly from boxing, but also from the way he sat after training and at home. Hope you can decipher that, and I'm really interested in your take. Before you answer that, just for my sake, can you explain what external rotators are, medial rotators are? What are those?
All right, so like when, I guess from layman's terms, you could probably say that when you're turning out your knee from an external standpoint, so if I'm going to block a calf kick or just a regular tie kick to the thigh, I externally rotate my leg to check a kick, right?
Okay.
So if he lacks that mobility to do so, obviously he's going to get leg kicked the shit out of. So we want to make sure that we get that fixed, properly. Also, it does help with lateral movement. It helps with movement in and out the pocket. It also helps with takedowns and takedown defense. So from that point of view, yes, you definitely want to make sure that he's mobile enough to do that, just from a performance standpoint, and also from a health standpoint. If that type of tissue is being tight, usually the opposite side or the antagonistic side is way loose. So, and that's not primarily all the time, but most of the time that's what I've seen. What was fascinating to me was he said the lead leg was primarily more dominant and he said that it was had more hypertrophy in a sense. For me personally, fighting for such a long time, I developed a more hypertrophy on my back leg, but that's the type of fighter I was. I was more pushing off of my back leg, where I had more of a boxing style, where he might be having more of a Muay Thai style, which he said his background was in, I believe. So I think that may play a major part, but I've had to deal with it primarily in my own self, and I see it with all my fighters. And pretty much if you have a veteran, they're gonna have some imbalances from left to right just because of the way the stance is in the sport. So yeah, he's doing all the right things: unilateral movement, unilateral strength training, making sure that you're doing your rear foot elevated split squats, walking lunges, single leg presses, single leg pull or single arm pulls, things like that. That's going to isolate each side of the body, and then also from there some soft tissue work. Like you said, some Graston, maybe even, obviously passive and active stretching will also be beneficial. And also trying to work more from that other side and try to get more volume on the weaker side will actually help with gaining that hypertrophy. Not so much trying to balance things out, but just trying to catch up to the other side, but also making sure that we're maintaining strength on the side that's strong. We don't want to just fully negate that other side, trying to build up, the weaker side. So things have to slowly kind of connect together.
All right, well, I hope the folks at Fight Performance Industries that helped you in your questions. The next question is from Melise Shadid. I hope I'm saying that right. Shadid on Instagram. And they ask, how do you prepare your athletes when they start lifting for max strength if they have never done it before? Which I think is interesting.
Well, first and foremost, I think she means by like 1RM max strength, absolute strength, the ability to strain, the ability to move weight slowly. First, they have to make sure that they have adequate amount of muscle mass and joint integrity to do so. So primarily within a first block of training, you would make sure that they're doing more higher volume, lesser intense sets to actually build up a solid base of muscle and joint integrity. And that's why the first part of our phase from a periodization standpoint, especially for combat sports, is to build up some solid tissue to maintain throughout the entire camp so that they can actually gain some solid strength from that, which will in turn end up into being explosive power. So these type of things kind of phase by phase go into each other, and that's what we call phase potentiation. Now from that point, I would say, well, how I would structure it, I would make sure that they can do at least a 5-rep max with good intent, fast velocity, and I'm talking about intent to move the bar fast. Obviously once, the intensity goes up, the bar speed's going to slow down, but the intent still needs to be fast, right? The only way you're going to move heavy weight is as fast as possible. You only have so much time to strain before you pass the fuck out. And
why
trust
is
me,
it has to be fast and say not a controlled lift? Like, why is speed pushing? What does that do to you? What's the point and what is it improving your body if you're doing it fast?
You have to think of force production, right? So I'm trying to develop as much force as possible. Now, with that being said, we're trying to recruit as much motor units as possible to lift the weight. More motor units will actually aid in more force output. So from that point of view, yeah, you want to be controlled, obviously, but you want to be controlled and be as fast as possible. That makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, for a novice like myself, is it by doing that, are you building muscle quicker? Like, is that a faster route to building strength and muscle? Is that the purpose of it?
There's a few mechanisms. There's a bunch of mechanisms to actually build strength. And the one thing is mainly building up that rate of force development and motor unit recruitment. So knowing and trying to find a way to put as much force into whatever the external load is. Could be a bar, could be a prowler, could be whatever. But you want to create as much force as possible to actually gain that central nervous system strength, that absolute strength. Now, yeah, you can gain some muscle through that, but like I said, there's 3 mechanisms to building muscle. It's mechanical tension, which is high amounts of weight, right? There's metabolic stress, which is a bunch of volume, a bunch of frequency, something that's actually going to stress that, that metabolic output, right? Or that metabolite. And then the last thing is obviously muscle damage. So basically what we're talking about is like that deep burn or that pump that you get when you're doing high amounts of volume, right? That's what the bodybuilders say. They try to get the pump, right? So that type of thing where you're breaking down that tissue, that's the type of stuff that's actually going to aid in more muscle hypertrophy. When we're talking about strength, adequately, it's primarily going to be more intense than it is higher volume. Now, I'm not saying that you can't gain strength from higher volume sets, but the more optimal approach is to move weight fast and move it as heavy. Well, get as heavy as weight as possible and move it as fast as possible.
All right, fair enough. Thank you. I feel I get it now much more. Now, moving on to our third question from Coach Heaney on Instagram. He asked, or they ask, excuse me, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. Do the fighters get you involved in their nutrition? Which it's interesting because me and you were talking about this a couple of days ago. If so, to what extent would you be involved? And that's one of his 2 questions. That's the first one, but answer that one.
It depends on the athlete. It depends on the fighter that wants me involved. If they want me involved and they ask for my advice and they ask for my help, I definitely help them out. I know, and if they have a nutritionist that they already work with, I make sure that I'm fully involved with them as well to correlate, the specific demands and what fuel sources they would need for each demand that they train for. So yeah, I mean, like I said, it just depends on the fighter.
You mentioned that you trained over 100 fighters since you were 19. What percentage would you say you were a part of their nutrition planning and diet and program?
Yeah, so especially in the early years of my career, I trained a lot of my teammates, and they didn't know how to weight cut either. And I'm actually going to be talking about this in the ebook, but I have crazy amounts of stories that I could tell you about crazy ass weight cuts that I had to go through with my teammates and myself. But in the early years, yeah, I was primarily probably 80 to 90% of, with their weight cut and with their diet, more so than the actually strength and conditioning side. Now it's actually kind of flipped, and now I'm probably like 30% on their diet and more so on the strength and conditioning, obviously.
Is that because you're dealing with more, not better fighters, but bigger fighters? They're in the UFC, they're in Bellator, so at that point they're making more money, so they can go out and get specialists that are nutritionists, and they can get a specialist as a strength coach. Especially, they have the money now to get all those things instead of a person trying to help them out and do everything for them.
Yeah, I mean, usually the guys and girls that train at our gym are pretty well established, and they usually come in with a nutritionist or a dietitian or a weight cut specialist, whatever you want to call them. So I don't really try to step on anybody's toes with that. You know what I'm saying? I just try to work as much as I possibly can, and like with the prospects that are coming up that don't have access to a Lockhart or a Tony Ricci or a Chris Algieri, somebody like that, then I'll help them out, of course, because it just helps with the whole entire performance and the physical preparation that we had, because a shitty weight cut can fuck up an entire camp. So I mean, I want to make sure that that's something that we plug in, so we're not we're not leaving that out. But yeah, and I'm not a nutritionist by heart. I don't have a background in nutrition like that. But I've cut weight probably around 20 times, and I've cut around, I would say, 30 fighters' weight, and they're all different, different styles, different aspects of life. But like I said, I'm not known I'm not the diet guy, pretty much anymore, I should say. I used to be, but now I'm more the strength guy, and I like it that way, to be honest.
All right, now the second question, and this is an interesting one. I'm curious on your response from Heaney. Is also, what is your opinion on the importance of breathing techniques prior, during, and after exercises or fights? And is there any routines you do before fights?
Yeah. So I've talked about this in the past, this proper diaphragmatic breathing, intra-abdominal pressurization, a lot of DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization techniques, stuff that I learned from Kabuki Strength. These type of movements that we do, we usually do them in our preparation, in our warm-ups. I'll make sure that everybody's breathing and bracing 360 throughout the entire lumbar spine to create that tightness, create good stiffness in the lumbar spine so they can create more force output in the outer extremities. While they're training, obviously, we want to make sure, especially if they're getting under heavy load or they're trying to be explosive from their outer extremities, like a med ball throw or a box jump or something like that, you want to create that stiffness. You want to create that tightness in the core. And you do that with that, like I said, that intra-abdominal pressurization, that IAP. And then after training, I usually have them do some type of diaphragmatic breathing where they're breathing, in through the back of their mouth and actually trying to bring their body back to parasympathetic so we can jumpstart that recovery process, which I'll have them actually bring their legs up over their heart and have them breathe for a good 6 minutes. And then from there, either I'll have them hit the sauna just for hormonal benefits, but also so they're not going, and this is my kind of my secret, but I'm letting it out now, but usually...
And you didn't even need an ebook, people. Look at that.
I know, right? But even with the guys, and this is where the art of coaching comes into play, and even with the guys that I have, these are all high level and they're all very hard workers. So for me, I have to physically kind of fool them in a way, and I hope my fighters ain't listening to this. But I have to physically fool them, because if I don't, then they're just going to go and do pad work or go hit the bag for another fucking hour and a half. And that's keeping time away from our recovery. Yeah. So what I'll have them do, instead of having them, go ahead and do whatever they want after they're done with training, I'll tell them to go hit the sauna. And even if it's a 10-minute sauna, after they obviously bring their heart rate down and their body temperature down a bit, then I tell them to go hit the sauna. One, for obviously hormonal benefits, and it's been known to have that. And it's been studied, and there's literature on that for days, especially for Dr. Rhonda Patrick. You can check her stuff out on hypothermic conditioning. But also, so they don't fucking go and do another grappling class or a no-gi jiu-jitsu class or go hit the bag for another hour and a half. I'm actually getting them to actually calm the fuck down so they can recover and get back to their training the next day. And that's primarily what I do. A lot of the times I train my guys, most of the time, I train my guys at night. So I want them to hit the sauna, get tired, and go to bed after they eat, of course.
All right, fair enough. I mean, moving away from the Ask Daru segment back to some focuses of the show. Now you want to talk about special exercises that transfer over to the fight game. I mean, do you have any examples from, fighters you've worked with that some of these exercises have been really beneficial with?
Yeah, so there's high transferability in a lot of these general specific exercises that I usually do. One that I love is the Zercher squat. It's where you put the barbell inside the crook of your elbow. And basically what you do is you actually do a squat with the bar inside the arms. And as you squat up and ascend, you are actually going to thrust your hands up like you're punching the ceiling, kind of simulating like a double underhook, right? And you're actually utilizing your hips, you're utilizing your glutes, your quads, your upper back, mid back, all the muscles that you would need for a takedown or, to get somebody in the clinch, things like that. I think it has very high transferability using all the muscle groups that you would use inside the cage for sure. The next one would be a med ball rotational throw. Simulates a punch, especially the way we do it with the rotation of the hip, leading with the hip and following with the arm, making sure that they're getting good transverse explosive power throughout the entire trunk, and making sure that they're obviously, like I said, getting that intra-abdominal pressure. That's definitely going to transfer over into either an overhand or a straight right or straight left, wherever, they're southpaw orthodox. Then from there, I would say heavy sled drags. Just from a GPP standpoint, I think that that's definitely something that you can simulate, especially if you have a partner that you can pummel with while you're walking with the sled. It's almost driving forward, just like you would if you're trying to get a takedown off a cage, that grinding, moving forward type of feel, especially if you're a wrestler, and especially if you're if you have a Greco-Roman background. I think that's even better, a Greco-Roman wrestling background. I think that would be highly efficient. Then from there, let me see. I love, and it's something that I haven't seen anybody else do. I think I coined this one, but it's a glute bridge dumbbell floor press. And what that does is that actually helps with joint centration and stabilizing one joint and moving another. This actually helps a lot with the guys that are more jiu-jitsu type players, where they have to be explosive and strong in certain limbs and joint angles, but also have to be stable and isometrically sound and strength and strong in those aspects. So you would actually get in a glute bridge, grab 2 dumbbells, and from there you would just press the dumbbells up like you're in a bench press situation, but you're bridged up to where your glutes, your lower back, your hamstrings are all activated, your core is activated, and you're actually moving dynamically with your arms. So definitely helps out. I think that transfers over very well, especially in ground contact type of situations. That was it.
All right, fair enough. Now, next one is why testosterone replacement can be taken and why people could see it being dangerous for fighters to take in competition. I mean, we've seen in the sport of MMA, I couldn't say so much in boxing, but we've seen people in MMA like Dan Henderson and Vitor Belfort, they were benefited greatly. I think even Forrest Griffin might have used it a little bit too, benefited greatly from using TRT, but it's an unfair advantage because it's an older man's body, an older man's intelligence experience with a younger man's body. I mean, what are your opinions on why people can take it, but why it could be dangerous in the fight sport?
Well, when when you get older, obviously testosterone starts to lack. Growth hormone is brought down as well. I think it's after the age of 30 to 31 that significantly drops. So yeah, older fighters that are on their way out, I think, and it should be everybody, even young guys have low T if their cortisol and their stress levels are high, and some people are actually born with higher testosterone than other people. So I think that they need to do a blood test for everybody, and even in the Joe Rogan and Louis Simmons conversation, he was talking about this, is where I think that everybody should have an even playing field, and if somebody has high enough testosterone, like they were on TRT, but naturally, then that other person should be right upon them from a hormonal standpoint. They need to be even, because at that point, who's at a disadvantage, right? If I have a guy who's naturally higher in testosterone, and then I have a guy who's, pretty much down in the dumps, and they fight each other, then they're going to say, oh, no, that was fair because he wasn't injecting endogenous testosterone. I don't think that that's fair either. So, but it is what it is. And I think that that's why it'll never change, because people see it as a drug, and people see it as a disadvantage for the person not on TRT or testosterone replacement. But at the end of the day, I mean, look what Japan did, and look what they're doing over there now still, where they're not even doing drug testing in Japan. They were like, we're not going to drug test you at all.
Yeah.
So it makes, and that they could cause, for more exciting fights, because there are more powerful, stronger fighters that are, what are they doing? They're more explosive. So they're actually ending fights. They're actually KOing people. Now, not to say that I'm an advocate of people getting knocked out, but trust me, I'm not. But at the end of the day, to make the sport more exciting, that's what you could do. But for the safety of the athlete, for the safety of, the sport itself, to be a profession, you can make an argument of not having that a part of the sport.
I mean, and also for people listening that if they've heard of TRT, heard of testosterone therapy, the thing itself, could you just explain to people what testosterone does that makes it beneficial to the body, what its purpose in the body is, what it does, other than making a man, a more masculine, things like recovery and all those kind of things that it's important to a fighter, an athlete.
Yeah, testosterone is a male hormone. Obviously, it's going to make you stronger, make you recover better, give you more aggression. Also, obviously, with your libido, to spike your libido, things like that. But in general, testosterone replacement is an androgynous oil, pretty much, that's created to basically increase a male's testosterone, and from there, that could cause, obviously, strength increases and things like that. Like I said, even females do it, but in small amounts, and that could actually help with aggression. That could help with, and there's negative side effects and there's positives, So with anything, what I'm saying. I mean, people take Advil and there's negative and positives to that. I'm not a full advocate of either, but like I said, whatever you need to do to feel good, to feel better, and for general people, if an old man, in his 60s, and that's healthy for him to take, because let's face it, having low testosterone is just as dangerous as having high testosterone. So, we want to make sure that we're even, and even guys that fighters. I mean, I think a while back, I'm not going to say the fighter's name, but the guy was a young guy. He's 27 years old. He was a champion at the time. They tested his testosterone, his blood work, and he came back, very low. It was lower than the normal. And this is a young, healthy guy. But the amount of stress put on his body decreased his testosterone, dramatically. And at the end of the day, a guy that young should not have that low of testosterone. So, one, you have to make sure that your stress levels are, at bay. You don't want to make sure that you fucking have so much cortisol that you can't move and you feel like shit every day, And then you want to make sure that you have some level of aggression, especially as a fighter. If you don't have no aggression, you're gonna get your ass beat. So you wanna have that in mind. And the same thing for me is, like, if I'm lifting weights, man, and the weight I'm lifting, it can significantly crush me. It could fucking kill me. So I have to have some type of aggression like I had when I fought. And that's why I like the sport of what I'm doing now. But, if my testosterone isn't adequate, isn't, optimal, yeah, that shit's gonna crush me, and I'm gonna get hurt. So the same concept to go from all walks of athletes in sports.
So you'd be open to TRT use eventually in your life, and not going to feel like any ego or pride about it.
Not at all, not at all. Especially if I feel good and I feel like it's gonna benefit me and not hurt me or harm me. Hell no, why not?
All right, now our last topic before we head on out is you want to talk about the art of coaching fighters and giving them what they want and then what they need. I mean, you have a lot of experience. Yes, you're not only a trainer, a strength and conditioning coach. You are, a trainer. You are a coach to athletes with personalities and ideas and moods and egos, and it's, you're coaching just as much as anybody. Now, you wanted to play a clip from PJ Nestler and one of his appearances on Barbell Shrugged. Just let the people know who a little bit about who PJ Nestler is and why you want them to hear this particular piece of audio.
Yeah, so PJ Nestler is a strength and conditioning coach out of California. Really smart kid. I'm actually going to be doing a seminar with him, obviously, in April of this year. But he's talking about this on Barbell Shrugged, where basically he's doing everything correctly from a coach's standpoint. And we have to make sure that as coaches, we're not just putting the science behind everything, that you have to have some type of personality and personability to your athlete, to your fighter, to understand them as an individual. And that's where the art of coaching and the science of the art of coaching comes into play. And here's a clip that what he was talking about makes a lot of sense. So check it out.
Feel like you did a lot.
Right.
If you just run a couple of 10-yard sprints with like a 2-minute break in between, you're going to walk away from 5 sprints and be like, I didn't do shit.
Right.
Yeah, people like to feel wrecked at the end or else they didn't do anything.
Right.
And one of the reasons we brought PJ in is because you are training UFC fighters and MMA fighters who probably don't, like, if they don't crawl out of the gym, they didn't feel like they put in a workout. So there's a psychological aspect here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see in my field is, everybody who comes to us, they want to just get smoked. They need to get crushed to get something out of it. And that's part of the educational piece for me, in working with athletes, working with MMA fighters, or working with anybody, is understanding that there's different adaptations that we can train for, and you don't have to leave here feeling worse than you came in. A lot of times you come in and you can still leave here feeling great and you still got something out of it.
Right.
So, I think trying to get people to understand that is always a challenge early on, but
right.
They have to know what they're training for.
All right, that was PJ Nestler from guest spot on Barbell Shrugged. I mean, what else do you want to add to what PJ said in that clip?
No, I think he said everything correctly. There's nothing really too much to add, but what I could say is that he definitely, I understand what he goes through, and being somebody who's around fighters on a constant basis, you have to pull them back. And more people think that, you have to motivate them, but, I motivate my high school kids. I don't have to motivate a professional fighter. Mm-hmm. If they're not motivated to do work, they're not at American Top Team. And that could go for everybody that's a professional at the highest level, especially in the UFC and Bellator and these high level promotions. For me, like I said, the same thing with the sauna thing, where I would have to actually, kind of lie to them to help them, and that basically means if I have to tell them to go into a sauna, instead of going and doing, 10 rounds on a bag, because I know that that's going to, not benefit them from a recovery standpoint, then that's what I have to do. And also, like I said, a lot of people have their way of training, and I get a lot of people from overseas and in Europe where, there's different styles or different aspects. Luckily, now the fighters kind of follow me on social media, so they know my style and they know what I'm doing actually is efficient and works. But in the beginning, there was a lot of guys that just wanted to go. And even Mo, for, being a veteran that he is, I still have to pull him back. And I have to tell him certain things to make sure that he understands why we're doing it and why you shouldn't do some things. But I also, like I said, if they want a certain type of intensity, I may give them that intensity. But I also need to make sure that I give them what they need to perform at the highest level and to progress them accordingly.
All right, Fair enough. I mean, that is all our topics for this week. Also, our Ask Daru questions. Big thank you. Just want to go out to Breaking Muscle for putting us on these episodes. Also, remember, you can listen to all of our previous episodes, including our stuff on Breaking Muscle, by going to our pages, Fight Strength podcast pages on Spotify, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, iTunes, but of course, YouTube. What else we got? We got Player FM and SoundCloud. Phil, let them know your social, your Twitter, your Instagram, your Snapchat, the Facebook, all this stuff, so they can follow you. All these knowledge bombs they want to piece a little bit more, or so they can find out where the ebook is going to come out when.
Thank you, sir. Daru Strong on all social media handles except for my Snapchat is Daru Strong 1. You can check out my YouTube. I'm gonna try to start doing more videos on there. It's Phil Daru, simple. As far as my all of my templates, all my programs there, and my ebook and my seminars coming up, you can go to darustrong.com. You can check that out. Also, I'll be doing more new and improved weekly newsletters. So be on the lookout for that. I'll be writing some articles up, and be on the lookout for that 24-week Fight Strength Combat Sports Performance program brought to you by Fight Camp Conditioning. That's coming out very soon with video breakdown of all exercises. So it's going to be something special. So be on the lookout for that. Jason, let them know your social media handles.
On Twitter, I am Cheat Seats Chat. On Instagram, Jericho Vendetta. Look for my recent work on MMAsucker.com. I have some recent stories and things going on over there you could check out. Also, just started a new weekly video show on MMAsucker.com called Sucker Shots, where it's me giving a little review and breakdown of the MMA week in news that was. Check that out. Also, don't forget Fight Strength Podcast on Facebook and Fight Strength _ on Twitter. That is our episode of Fight Strength NSFW on Breaking Muscle. I am Jason Burgos. He is Phil Daru. Phil, say bye.
Bye.